Red Wing, read by Bain Belkey.
I know. All you see is a body in the yard there, and you figure, well, someone sure did a number on her. Head missing and everything, just her neck stump there with all that mess snaggling out of it. The arteries, yeah, I guess that's the windpipe there, the what have you. I guess it's natural you think she's the victim. Heck, I would too if that was all I seen. If I didn't know what led up to it, the way she rode me and all. And she rode me pretty good, you better believe it. She rode me pretty darn good. Not that I'm saying, the end don't justify the means or whatever. It was just pretty goddamn grim is my point. Well, you say, okay, so she rode you. She gave you a hard time. Still, that don't justify no head missing. Sure, that's how most people will see it. I'm not a dummy here. I know how it looks. The Eustachian tube, yeah, that's what it is. Anyway, I'm just saying, look at it from the other side. I mean, picture this. So we're lying in bed one night, and she puts her arm around me, and she starts rubbing around. And I shrug it off because I'm not in the mood, see? Like it happens, you can't always be in the mood. So I shrug it off, and she says, well, I guess it's true what they say. And I says, so what do they say? And she says that the fruit don't fall far from the tree. And I says, now what's that supposed to mean? And she says, you know darn well what it means. And I says, supposing you tell me. And she says, by his fruit shall ye know him. And I says, oh, Proverbs, Proverbs. And she says, well, how would you explain it then? And I says, explain what? And she says, Kyle going gay. Our boy Kyle, he lives down in Minneapolis. And he told us 15 months ago he's gone gay. Now, this is not something for proper people. This is not something you drag into a marital dispute. This is a source of heartache and soul-searching, I can tell you. This is our boy here, and not a piece of ammunition for some, this is not something you use to make a goddamn mud pie. It's something we never even discussed, though we shed some tears, I can tell you. So now it makes me angry, and then she says more. Maybe, she says, maybe you prefer sticking your thing into Norm Walensky's big old butt. Now, this is way out into the realm of I don't know what. Norm Walensky, he's a friend of mine, it's true. And we ice fish together, if that's a crime, which I'm not aware that it is. But Norm and me, Christ, we barely even talk to each other. I'll say to him, Norm, how are you for a little fishing this weekend? And he'll say, yeah. And I'll go drive, pick him up, and then we barely talk on the way out to Mille Lacs, and hardly even say a word once we're out there in the hut fishing, except maybe, oh, there's one, or oh, is that one? So this, she's going beyond. This is plain old goat getting, and it's childish, and I say it's garbage. But later that night afterwards, just to prove to myself that it's garbage, I sit there, and not that I would tell this to anyone, but I sat and shut my eyes and imagined Norm Walensky taking off his trousers. Real slow, his back to me. And then he drops his briefs, and then he steps slowly out of his briefs, and then with his back still to me, he leans forward and puts his hands on his knees, and he waggles his behind. And let me tell you, honestly, nothing. There was no feeling of a sexual nature provoked within me. And I know people say, well, we never really know even about ourselves. I mean, you can be married 40 years and then molest an 8-year-old because the sexual desire will well up from within. Just hit a gusher. But I tell you, I am about as interested in Norm Walensky's butt as well I just can't even imagine. And I even tried to picture it as vivid as I could, him dropping the trousers and so forth with nice light. But I cannot conceive of the physical act of putting my thing in Norm's butt. And anyway, what would Norm be doing meanwhile? But these imaginings was later. At the time I just says to her, well, that's pathetic. And then she says, I'll say it is, and rolls over as if she's won the argument. Which leaves me fuming. Except there's more even, because after a minute the bed is shaking so I can tell she's crying. And she's making sounds, little ones, nothing showy, just enough to let me know. As if I've hurt her feelings by talking about her sticking her thing, which she doesn't even have, into Norm Walensky's behind. And now I'm supposed to apologize to her, which makes no damn sense. And this is her. This is my wife. This is her right to the ground, making me always in the wrong. This is what drives me so crazy. She lies there crying with me so angry I can't see straight. This is what I'm driving at. And was that the only time? No, sir, that was not the only time. Like we're lying in bed once. And she says, so then, what did you think of Arnie Carlson? And I says, not a bad governor. And Rudy Perpich, she says. And I'm wondering, but I says, not too bad. And she says, so how come we didn't get to have sex during either of their administrations? Now, this is pure poppycock. It's beyond exaggeration. And I says, you don't know what you're talking about. That's a lot of damn shit, I says. And I don't use the word frequently. Damn, I do, but not the other one. Not since Al Quee, she says. Not since Al Quee. A lot of damn shit, I says. You're goddamn right it is, she says, and rolls over. But I can tell it's not going to end there, that she hasn't had enough yet, and she's just lying there thinking. And sure enough, in 2 minutes, she rolls back over and says, I guess you think it's pretty funny getting into arguments like this. And I says, I don't think it's funny. Well, you do it enough, she says. And I don't say nothing. If you don't like it, how come you do it all the time? She says, I think you do like it. And I don't say nothing. And then I says, do what now? And she says, huh? And I says, you say I do it all the time. And she says, yeah, as if you enjoy it, like you think it's funny. And I says, but do what now? What do I do? And she says, oh, for God's sake. And that's that. But after a few minutes, just when I'm drifting off, she says, you know, if it wasn't for the financial practicalities, I would just move out. And I don't say nothing. So she says, I'd move out so darn fast it'd make your head spin. So I think about it, and then I think about it, and then I say, well, we can talk about the financials. Oh, she says, yeah, sure, we can talk. Talk about 2 households and what you make. A long darn talk that'll be. Then another minute. Well, she says, maybe I could go live with Kyle. And I says, now you're not going to do that. I'm thinking, for Christ's sake, the boy has a life down there in the Twin Cities. And it may not be the life we would have chosen for him, but ain't the sulphry fires of hell neither, which is what her being down there would make it for him. And she says it'd just be temporary while I get my bearings. And I says, now that boy has a life down there, and and she says, Kyle would love to see me for a little while. And I says, now, and she says, you don't even know your own boy. He would love it. And I says, now I know that boy. And she says, yeah, well, then that would explain all the times you predicted him going gay. I guess you know him real good. Maybe I'll just stay down there, she says, with Kyle. Well, she ends up not calling him, but God damn it, now she knows how to get me going. So she keeps talking about moving in with Kyle just to make my gut churn. So she's churning my gut on a daily basis, and this is when she starts going on the shopping trips with her friend Connie. Now, I don't care for Connie. Connie is a woman, she could be a linebacker if ladies with hot flashes ever formed a league. She wears gold bangles and these shirts with the flashy prints that she can't quite fit into that they make out of a fabric that goes shh, 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 whenever she walks around with her big old arms swinging. These shirts, I'm telling you, hold a match within 5 yards and whoomp, that'd be the end of Connie Buchanan. Like in a forest fire when the next tree in line just bursts into flame. And her head would go, too, because, believe me, that big puffy white hair is mostly air and hairspray. Just go whoomp. So there she'd be, a big, greasy, naked thing, all charred, except with gold bangles still hanging about her wrists and those big green eyeglasses melted all over her black, blubbery nose, and smoke wisping off the top of her head. Whoomp. So like I say, I don't care for Connie. She's loud and she smokes. So that I can always smell if she's been in the house when I walk in, even if she hasn't lit up because of the damn perfume. And she's in the house more and more, cackling and walking around and smoking, and then they go out shopping, the 2 of them, more than they ever did before. And my wife now, when she asks for money, she calls it her settlement. This is from our discussions about Kyle, because she said once, well, okay, if I'm not going to move in with Kyle, then you got to give me a settlement. And I said, what do you mean a settlement? And she said, well, things can't just go on like they are. This marriage is dead, and you got to give me a settlement. Which meant that things did go on just like they were, except that she spent more and more money and called it a settlement. And she'd not only go out shopping, but Connie also got her started going to the Indian casino a couple times a week. And I work for NSP. I am not Mr. J.P. Morgan here. And she even started talking louder like Connie. This is not my imagination. It was like she busted free all of a sudden, except that makes it sound like a good thing. She was free in a bad way. Like all her life, she'd just been waiting for an opportunity to turn into Connie Buchanan and start buying them ugly print shirts. And I said once, all this money you're spending, you ever think about our retirement? And she'd say, "What do you mean?" And I said, "It's not just my money, it's our money you're throwing away here." And she said, "Well, you should have thought of that before." And I said, "Before what?" And she said, "Oh, for Pete's sake," and walked away like I was a goddamn idiot. But I couldn't not give her the money, because then she'd start in on Kyle, and our marriage is dead and what have you. It was blackmail, see, nothing more than damn blackmail. Because we both knew if I didn't give her the settlement, then she'd bring up how I didn't have the sexual, hadn't been engaging in the sex act. That was always in the background. The threat of her being ready to blab about all this stuff that I don't think needs to be talked about. And she'd waltz around the subject just to turn my gut. She'd even hint about it with Connie there, and she'd come up to me in front of Connie and demand her settlement. Yeah, it made no difference for her to boss me around with someone right there. And once I heard Connie say to her, "Why don't you get some of your settlement from that lump in the living room?" Which made me suspect it was even possible the whole idea came from Connie. And then once in front of Norm we were playing cards, and she asked me for her settlement. So I give her some money, and she leaves, and Norm says, "What did she mean, settlement?" And I said, "Oh, nothing." And that's how bad it was. But it was worse, really. I don't know if I can describe it. See, she was making it impossible for me to have the, sex relations with her by using it as a thing to beat me up with. Like if I did try to have sex relations, that would mean she'd won and I was given up. And it would have been the occasion for a lot of smug remarks. So just thinking about that made it impossible for me to have sex relations. I mean, the sex act, that's supposed to be about things that two people, not things of not winning or losing or beating someone. The sex act, the fleshly thing that, the holy joy of, the celebration, well, it just wasn't right. And she was wrecking it and using it for goddamn money. My own wife was using sex for goddamn money and was grinding me into the muck, right into the damn muck. And the more she ground me into the muck, the better she seemed to feel. And she made me smaller and smaller and smaller. And she got bigger and bigger and bought more and more horrible shirts and started to go casino gambling 3 times a week. And she ground me into the muck, and she stood upon me so that she herself would not be in the muck. My own wife stood upon me in the muck. That's what I mean. And the life force drained from me and went into her. Our future flowed into her in the form of our retirement money. And our present flowed into her in the form of my vital spirit, and our past ceased to be. For she was a different person, and I was a husk. And people noticed. Kyle, even. I was talking to him on the phone one day, and he said, "Geez, Mom seems to have come into her own." That's what he said. She's come into her own like it was a good thing. And I said, "Yeah, you think?" Because I couldn't tell the boy that his own mother had become a muck-grinding giantess, and he even threatened to make his own life a muddy hell. You can't tell that to a boy. So people noticed. About her, I mean, not about me. They did not notice that I had become a husk, maybe because I'm not the demonstrative type. Maybe I always seemed like a husk. Although once at work, Fred Martin said, "Geez, you okay?" And I said, "Yeah." Also, I forgot. Norm Wolensky said once after I turned down a second fishing trip in a row, he said, "Well, okay." As if to say, well, I don't understand, but I'm not going to pry. And I appreciated that. But ordinarily, people did not notice. They did not notice how big she had become. She was as big as an elephant, a great mad elephant trampling madly through the village of our life, knocking over all the little thatched huts, and chasing the natives who ran screaming before her before getting mashed between her stubby wriggling toes. I had no power before this mad elephant. My power had drained away, so I stared stupefied as she charged trumpeting this way and that to the shopping mall, to the Indian casino, to Connie Buchanan's coffee clutch, which is what she left me a note one day saying she was at so I should fix my own dinner. And the wind whistled where all the thatched huts had been, but now stood only the odd tumbled chimneys wisping smoke. I don't remember the act itself. The first thing I remember is running through the woods making loud hawking noises as I tried to breathe. My gut was bouncing and my lungs stung with sharp air. My chest ached as if there was an old fan blade inside clattering against my ribs. Time was I could run and run and run on forward-flowing feet. Now my footfalls were big up and down crashes that shook the ground and jangled my spine. Time was nothing on me bounced. Now everything heaved and jostled and my insides slurped this way and that. I realized there was something laced through the fingers of my right hand from which swung some weight. Her hair. Her head. Before that, sometimes in bed I had trouble breathing. She'd sleep there beside me, breathing in and out like a big industrial compressor. But I could not breathe. I would lie staring at the ceiling, staring at the squashed flat ceiling night after night. I lay there with my fists clenched, body rigid and squashed flat, like I was being forced down into the mattress by stones that had been rolled onto my chest, stones so heavy I could not breathe. Next to me, the great bellows went in and out, untroubled to eternity. One night she rolls over towards me and her eyes open up. She looks at me, and after a minute she says, "For Pete's sake, go to sleep." Then she rolls over and starts breathing again, in and out, in and out. I sat against a tree in the cool autumn. My breathing slowed to normal, and in the woods was a great peace. I wanted the moment of peace to last forever, the moment before thought and planning would have to resume. Here there was peace and breathing in the moment. Beyond the moment would only be pain, so the moment was ringed round with fear. And it was important to stay inside the moment. We'd been young once and in love. She'd been a demure girl from the iron range, and now her head lay beside me in the leaves. It was a time for reflection. I do not know how long the moment was. It was its own time, for time had stopped. And then the moment ended and time and fear resumed. I was running through the woods again. I thought maybe I can stay with Kyle down in the Twin Cities, but then I thought, could I really stay in his apartment? Sit on the couch and be introduced to his young gay friends and sip wine and sit and chat about matters of the day? Would I fit in or would it be awkward? And would I bring his mother's head? No, this was exactly her way of thinking. You cannot burden your own child like that. Yeah, now I remember, right after flinging the hatchet away. It went whippity-whoosh into the woods. Then I guess I started running. Oh, our lives were together, really. This act, it was not meant to separate her life from mine. It was crazy, granted, but not that way, not to separate myself. That much is clear to me as I walk through the woods now, still holding on to her. I would tell her this if she could hear. Like when a plant gradually grows around a stake in the garden, after a while you just can't separate it. Not that one of us was the plant and one the stake, like two plants that grow and twist around one another, and one just ends up choking the other off. They didn't separate, one just choked off. It got tighter and tighter until the one couldn't breathe. Or the other. They choked off. Or maybe they got too heavy and flumped to the ground into the shade. And then trees grew round them, new trees that stretched up out of the shade and into the light. This would be Kyle, I guess. I'm not quite sure how the homo thing fits in. Maybe I'm thinking this way because I'm walking through the woods and the trees stretch up. It's grown twilight and chill. I'm just walking now. I do not know how it will end. Oh, my dear Jesus, I feel so very lost.